Greetings, my friends, my dreamers. First of all, I'm going to have to apologize because there's some non-standard business going on in this video today. You can't really see it, but I'm in a hotel. I'm away from my studio. I don't have access right now to the normal, nice, treated studio environment that you're normally used to hearing me in, but I did want to get something out to you guys today because something very special has happened. So, like I said, I'm in a hotel doing an assignment for work, so I'll have to apologize in advance for any bizarre artifacts you might be hearing in the audio. Also, I wouldn't dream of uploading a facecam style video to the internet with this free Wi-Fi at the hotel. It's pretty slow, so I'll probably be lucky if I can even put up my cryptid wall scroll animation. That might even be too much for the network. I might have to keep this video as bare bones as possible, but there's a few things I really need to tell you. So first off, you might recall I told you that a dear dreamer from among you named George put me in contact with a man named Tony who runs a very prestigious podcast called the CONFESSIONALS podcast. A couple of months ago, George recommended that podcast to me, and he recommended that I reach out to Tony. And I did, and we were able to strike up a conversation, and I ended up actually being invited to participate in an episode of this podcast. I've never been really into podcasts before, but let me tell you, I listened to the CONFESSIONALS podcast, a couple of episodes, and not including the one that I was featured in, of course. That one's coming out today. It's out right now as you are listening to this. It's episode 118. The podcast overall is fantastic. It's very well produced, has some very interesting guests and discussions about pretty much everyone's favorite topic, which is cryptids and cryptozoology, whether it be experts in the field or people who are well versed in the conspiracy theories and the ideas surrounding these bizarre phenomenon around the world. Tony with the CONFESSIONALS podcast has amassed quite a few very, very interesting case studies and interviews with people who have had encounters with various cryptids such as Sasquatch and Dogman. And I highly recommend this podcast. Go on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, whatever podcast app you use, and check out the CONFESSIONALS podcast because he's been kind enough to, in this time of demonetization, in his own way, sponsor my show by giving me a tremendous amount of exposure and outreach to ears and audiences that I would not have gotten to otherwise. So basically, he's probably adding dreamers to our ranks as we speak. He and I had a very fascinating conversation a couple of weeks ago, and that has been released as of tonight, March 26th, under the name of episode 118 of the CONFESSIONALS podcast, Taking the Red Pill with mr.xdreams. Like I said, Tony is a fantastic host. I had a really great time. We actually talked for about 3 hours, and somewhere in there was a good podcast during that, and I look forward to doing it again. I can't wait. And he actually is one of the people that have been inspiring me towards making my own podcast. So when that starts coming down the pipeline in the near future, you guys will have some even more awesome stuff to look forward to from me and other people that I'll be bringing in for that. So, the CONFESSIONALS podcast, check it out. Episode 118 features yours truly as the guest. And make sure you leave Tony and the CONFESSIONALS podcast a 5-star rating on whatever platform that you listen on, because he definitely deserves it. You'll see in the production quality and just his upbeat and charismatic hosting of the shows. Very open-minded, very humble guy, and I appreciate him. So, Tony, if you're listening, I appreciate you, my friend. Thanks very much. And also a big thanks to George, our fellow dreamer, because this basically would not have happened if it wasn't for George bringing the CONFESSIONALS podcast to my attention and asking me to reach out to Tony. a gentleman, and a scholar. So, my friends, there was something else I wanted to tell you about, and it was a dream that I had 2 nights ago. If you follow my Twitter, I mentioned that I had another multiverse-related dream, and I wanted to take this moment to explain to you, to take you through, and give you a bit of a glimpse into the inner workings of my mind. Now, I'm not afraid to admit that even my most interesting dreams sometimes have a little bit of color seeping in from the real world, some influence here or there about something that I'd seen in this world that I live in, the one in which I'm recording this show right now. But sometimes I get this feeling that there's more to it. As many of you know, if you listened to the show that I did a few weeks ago, in which I described that multiverse type dream, the dream that really solidified my giving credence to the idea of a multiverse and to the idea that our dreams are somehow a sort of gateway between this world and another. If you need a quick recap of that dream, I won't go into full detail about it because it was quite a long story, and the video is up there. It's called Multiverse Dream or something like that. I'll link it in the description down below. But basically what happened in that dream was that I realized that somehow, whenever I was supposed to have died in one world, in one reality, I would jump into the body of another one, another version of myself. And at the end of that dream, I jumped into this one, somehow melding my mind with the version of me whose voice you're hearing right now. I know it's hard to explain, but go back and look at the video and hear the full description of the dream if you really want to know more. I'd hate to have to spend another 20 minutes talking about that in another video to people who've probably already heard it. So anyway, not long ago I had another dream. In this dream, I found myself standing on a balcony. The architecture around me was a beautiful white marble with gold inlays. I wasn't too high off the ground, maybe 5 or 10 feet. So the balcony was a part of what seemed to be like a castle, with a large courtyard, and the castle walls beyond that. Running through the courtyard was a long marching path, so I was basically in the position to overlook the marching path as hundreds and hundreds of soldiers marched from inside the walls of the castle out the gates. But these were no ordinary soldiers. There were formations of soldiers riding automaton elephants, 20 feet tall, people in rank and file riding robotic ostriches, even a gigantic, autonomous robotic snake was among their ranks. I remember knowing that I had been instructed by someone in authority that I would not be joining the outgoing army. I was to stay behind for some reason. It was something I felt reluctant about, as if I was abandoning my brethren. I brought my gaze towards the interior of the balcony, and I looked around. Behind me was a heavily armored man, standing next to a woman who appeared to be some sort of engineer, working at a station that was sending sparks showering all over the ground. Directly to my right was an older man, grayish hair, scraggled, dressed in rags except for a brand new pair of black-rimmed glasses. The man said to me, calling me by my name, "You know, when this war is over, you still owe me that 150, smiling. I gave him a bit of a forced chuckle and said, "Yes, sir, I remember." As I thought about how unnatural it was for me to chuckle that way, it was so forced, I started to ponder and realized that I didn't know who I was, but I did know who the old man was. After all, I was standing in his castle. I served in his army. We were all his subjects. The humble old man, dressed in rags, was the king. This realization only left me with more questions. I turned to the king and said, "Sir, What do you think of me?" Not wanting to betray the fact that I had no idea who I actually was. He gazed at me with a reassuring look. He said, "You're a great warrior, a veteran of my army. I once saw you wipe out an entire family of refugees all on your own." He gave me a sly grin, as though he expected me to laugh. But I couldn't laugh. Thoughts raced through my mind, wondering to myself, in what world is it a good thing for a soldier to wipe out a group of refugees, a family? What kind of person would smile about that? My voice began to waver as I asked him another question. "Sir, are we good people? Are we the good guys?" The smile vanished from the king's face, and he just began staring out at the masses of passing automatons and soldiers. He didn't say another word to me. After about 5 seconds of silence, I heard a woman's voice say, "Yes, we are." I turned and looked at the engineer, who was glaring at me with a faint sadness in her eyes, and I knew that the only reason she said that we were the good guys is because, in her mind, we had to be, because if we weren't the good guys, then we were the bad guys. As I turned my eyes back toward the king, I slowly began to awake. So this dream was, there's a reason why I put this dream into the multiverse category, and that is mainly because of the way it felt. It felt like I was being plugged into another body, another version of myself. I felt physically indistinguishable from myself as the man that I am now, but everything about the world was so different. I was living in a walled-off kingdom with machines based off of animals. So in my pondering of this dream, I wonder if what I was seeing was a glimpse into an alternate timeline. Say perhaps that instead of inventing a wheel, people just eventually began to mimic the locomotion of other animals. Or perhaps, at some point, there was some major difference in the way technology developed. A difference so drastic that it ended up with people just attempting to replicate natural forms rather than building configurations with wheels with spaces in between for us to sit on. I realized that even if that were the case, it would be basically impossible to tell when or if I would even be ever born. But imagine that somewhere in some time, in some different reality, I did eventually get born. And when I dream, I can connect somehow to those alternate versions of myself, no matter when or where they are. Just another interesting little thing to think about, if you ask me. So that's about all I have for tonight, my friends, except for one thing. I just got a text this morning about a Michigan family who had a baby girl. They found these purple marks like scratches on her face and decided to record video from a video monitor in the baby's room, and what they captured was something extremely disturbing but also fascinating. A ghostly distortion moving about in the room that appears to be the silhouette of a person. And they believe that this is some type of apparition that has been doing harm to their child, and also turned out, as far as I can recall in the short time that I had to glimpse the article, that there had been at least one tragic death in that home in the past. Something that we should investigate, maybe say during a live stream. And I'd certainly be happy to do that if you guys would remind me next time I come on live. Hopefully by then I'll be at my house, in my little home studio,